Well, hello everyone and welcome to the Saturday recap where we look back on qualifying day at the 70th anniversary Grand Prix. And the big story of the day, we have had another Mercedes front row with Valtteri Bottas taking pole, but Nico Hülkenberg, what a lap! On his return to racing, only his second race back, putting that car in third on the grid, ahead of Max Verstappen. And the common opinion on social media has been, surely this must be convincing others, teams down the grid, to make sure that he is on the grid in 2021 with a full-time drive. So, going to talk about the day's action to start with. Starting off with the third practice session. Practice 3 was relatively uneventful. To be honest, one thing I'm going to say is I don't really think they needed the full practice schedule for the second race at each track, because they already have the data. But it was relatively uneventful, but we start to see some of the qualifying pace come through. Of course, it was another Mercedes 1-2. Lando Norris was third fastest, ahead of Nico Hülkenberg. Then you had Lance Stroll, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Alex Albon, Esteban Ocon, Carlos Sainz. Then you have Gasly, Kvyat, Vettel, Ricciardo, Grosjean, Latifi, Russell, Giovinazzi, Raikkonen, and Magnussen had a bit of a tough session. Now, I'm going to do things in a different order today. I'm going to save the F1 qualifying to last. But first, I am going to talk about the junior Formula races. So, first, let's talk about the Formula 2. It wasn't as exciting a race as we saw last week, but it did still have its fair share of action, the Formula 2 did. The race got underway, the likes of Lundgaard and Aitken struggled off the line, and Dan Ticktum got off the line well. He got up into second place and almost challenged Idot for the lead. But then Dan Ticktum messed that all up. He went into Beckett and then went off the track. He lost the position to Lundgaard, and he also lost out to Jack Aitken as well. And that really spelt the beginning of his undoing this race. Because as you can see, he was just dropping down the order like a stone, really struggling with the tyres. And you can see Nikita Mazepin getting past at Maggot's corner. Once all the drivers on the normal strategy had pitted, the likes of Ilott and everyone pitted, it was left to Mick Schumacher to lead the race, and he was under pressure from Nikita Mazepin. But Nikita Mazepin was really struggling with the front left, and whilst he hung on to the back of him, with Schwartzman just behind, he could not make a move stick. As you can see, Callum Ilott, he was in dominant form this race. He was sizing his way through the drivers on the alternate strategy. Whilst Dan Ticktum's struggles continued, as you can see, he then got passed round the outside by Louis Delatraz. And then there were a few unbelievable team radio messages from Dan Ticktum in the end, as he dropped right down the order. But as you can see, then came Mick Schumacher's pit stop. He pitted, I believe, on lap 19. And then he came out just behind Dan Ticktum, who he managed to pass going into Beckett's corner. That must have felt good for him. To make a pass through Beckett's is not easy. But then Nikita Mazepin was on the prowl. He then passed Ticktum and he was right on the back of Schumacher. I believe this was like the battle for 7th place. And then Mick Schumacher did not leave much room, but Nikita Mazepin went through anyway. And it was a very nail-biting moment. He went down the inside going into Stowe corner. But at the front, it was a dominant performance from Callum Ilott, who won the race and took the lead of the drivers' standings. And the race result is on the screen right now. It was Callum Ilott who won the race, with Christian Lundgaard finishing in second despite a mistake at Brooklands towards the end of the race. Then you have Jack Aitken who finished in third, his best result of the season so far. Then you have Nikita Mazepin in fourth. He managed to work his way up to fourth, passing Delatrez and Tsunoda as well. Mick Schumacher finished in seventh with Robert Schwartzman. He has actually dropped to third in the standings behind Lundgaard as well. But he has reverse grid pole for tomorrow, which could easily see him take back some of the advantage. Then you had Guan Yu Zhou finishing in ninth with Felipe Drugovich taking the final point in 10th. All 22 cars saw the checkered flag in this Formula 2 race. And then you had this morning you had the Formula 3 race. And this race really, the thing that I found in this race, there were a lot of DRS trains seem to be exasperated around Silverstone quite a lot. I mean, it's a track that's not difficult to overtake on, but DRS trains obviously weren't going to make it easy. But Logan Sargent led the way at the start of the race from Jake Hughes, who got up to second ahead of Liam Lawson at the start of the race. But Jack Doohan's good qualifying got ruined immediately after he damaged his front wing and got the black and orange flag and had to pit. Then you had Liam Lawson leading a train of Vesti and Pourchaire. But it was a very frustrating race for Theo Pourchaire. It was a case of pass or be pass, and if you get a passing attempt wrong, you could easily be overtaken again. And that happened to Pourchaire twice. Pourchaire attempted a move on Frederick Vesti, but then he got edged wide, and that opened the door for David Beckman to go through. And then he tried the same on Beckman, and then that allowed Bent Viscal to get through. But I believe that Pourchaire managed to get past Bent Viscal in the end. But then, as you can see, Liam Lawson managing to get on the back of Jake Hughes in the battle for second, but it wasn't to be. You had a collision between, I believe it was Malvestiti and Fernandez at the end of the race. But Logan Sargent took his first win in Formula 3 and has actually taken the lead of the drivers' standings. He won the race. I don't know why it says Novalak there after Vesti. That was updating, so ignore that. It was Sargent that won the race ahead of Jake Hughes. Then you had Liam Lawson in third, Frederick Vesti in fourth, David Beckman in fifth. Theo Pourchaire would have been disappointed with sixth, considering he had good pace. Oscar Piastri then actually managed to get ahead of Ben Viscal in eighth. Then you had Lorenz Zentelli with Ben Barnicoat taking reverse grid pole. There were 4 retirements in the form of Nannini, Williams, Malvestiti and Hauger. As I said, Logan Sargent now leads the standings by 6 points, back to second place Oscar Piastri after some bad luck. Oscar Piastri had his car issues on the way to the grid, but thankfully it didn't affect him in the race. Now it is time to talk about qualifying. And it was a relatively interesting qualifying session for the 70th anniversary Grand Prix. Q1 got underway and then it was a bad qualifying for Alfa Romeo as both cars once again lock out the back row. Nicholas Latifi was out in 18th ahead of just behind Kevin Magnussen. Danny Kvyat was angry with himself after he made a mistake which I believe he also stated damaged the car at Beckett's, and then that resulted in him qualifying only 16th. George Russell once again makes it into Q2. He is really proving to be one of these stars of the season, particularly on a Saturday. He starts in 15th. Esteban Ocon did originally qualify in 11th, but he had a 3-place grid penalty for an incident in Q1 where he impeded George Russell. It seemed that he was trying to get around one of the Alfa Romeos, but George Russell was going round on his lap. He should really have been informed by his team. Romain Grosjean had a decent qualifying session, starting in 13th, just behind Carlos Sainz. He will be disappointed with that. Sebastian Vettel, though, he showed absolutely no sign of getting into Q3, and 11th place, once again. There's not really much to say about Ferrari. Lando Norris starts in 10th. It was a difficult qualifying for McLaren. Behind Alex Albon, who at least got into Q3 this time. Charles Leclerc, he qualified in 8th, just behind Pierre Gasly. What a qualifying session for Pierre Gasly. Lance Stroll starts in 6th, just behind Daniel Ricciardo, who looks like he might start in 3rd for much of the session, but he dropped to 5th at the end. Then you have Max Verstappen, who did put in a last-gasp effort, but he couldn't beat Nico Hülkenberg. Easily the undisputed star of this qualifying session. Then you had the battle of the Mercedes. In the first round of qualifying laps in Q3, it was Lewis Hamilton who had the upper hand, and he had provisional pole. But Lewis had a slightly scruffy second lap, and Valtteri Bottas was able to pick up the pieces, and he just beat out Lewis Hamilton, and he took pole position for Mercedes, for another Mercedes front row lockout. And they are obviously going to be the ones to beat tomorrow. But it's going to be interesting. Something that's going to be interesting is Max Verstappen, I believe, is starting on the hard tyre. I believe he got into Q3 on the hard, so it'll be interesting to see how long into the race he's going to go. And can Nico Hülkenberg get that elusive first podium in Formula 1? And that is it for the Saturday recap. The Sunday recap will actually be a little bit later than usual tomorrow. But I'll be informing the time. It'll be on the Absolute Motorsport Twitter, because I've had a couple of issues with the RaceWeek Twitter account. I hope to get them resolved before the Spanish Grand Prix weekend, but it's unlikely they're going to be resolved before tomorrow. But thank you very much for watching, and we will see you tomorrow to recap what hopefully should be a fascinating 70th anniversary Grand Prix. Goodbye.